Mr. Rainwater.
Hey there, John.
I would say it's nice to meet you, but I don't believe in time as a concept, so I'm just going to say we always met. Today we're
uh,
talking about one of my favorite shows. And I'm not going to call it one of the greatest shows of all time because as a cohesive end to end currently entity, I would not say it's cohesive, harmonious in terms of story, plot, emotion, etc. But it is one of the most articulate, artistic, well executed, well meaning, well thoughtful.
yeah,
Like
definitely.
there's like so many great adjectives that I can give to this show.
Yeah,
But I would not
sure.
put it in like the greatest shows of all time. But in terms of its execution of its style and everything like that, the messages that it had to say, thematically, literally, fantastic. It's called Atlanta, in case I haven't said it already.
We've talked about it in a previous episode, though. For sure.
Yes. And after we went off the air last recording, I did tell you that we were doing this, but because you had cut out at the end of the episode, and I told the viewers, but not you. But we're talking about Atlanta today, which was pretty much the brainchild of Donald Glover, who had come off of his very well-known role as Troy Barnes on the hit. I want to call it a hit show, but I know it's more of a cult classic, Community.
Right.
It's hard to talk about this show in terms of episode to episode. And this is where I kind of like... This is how I try to explain it to people when I try and pitch it to them now. It's kind of like... what are the movies called? Anthologies.
Yeah.
When they have different stories and stuff within one particular movie.
Yeah.
That very much becomes Atlanta at one point. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And then I think we kind of talked about this in the previous episode, but I think also the anthology episodes, if you will, because there is a predominant narrative that's going on through the series, but it is broken up by these sort of the anthology pieces that touch on themes, or not touch on, that expand on themes touched on within the actual narrative, which I think is a really interesting way of doing that, because I think it alters or it offers an alternate perspective basically on stuff that they're kind of talking about within the overarching
season.
narrative.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And I think it's also just a way of playing with those ideas more too, you know. And I mean, they're wide-ranging themes dealing with race, dealing with like I mean, the episode I kind of keep going back to lately thinking about is the episode about the twins. So it's the episode where Darius goes to pick up a piano from this really like mysterious kind of place, and as
Teddy.
as the narrative evolves, you find out like, oh, this is as messed up as we were concerned it was going to be.
Teddy Perkins.
And it becomes this really interesting meditation on the idea of like what creates great art, and is that in itself great, you know? Like
all the while Donald Glover is in whiteface. I don't know if you can call it whiteface because he's doing Michael Jackson.
Wait, did Donald Glover play Teddy?
Yes.
I had no idea.
Oh yeah, he played Teddy Perkins.
Shit.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
He wrote that episode and he plays Teddy Perkins, so that's him doing the voice of Teddy the whole time.
He did an incredible job.
Supposedly, the rumor has it, or the IMDb trivia was that he was method acting that, and he stayed in character as Teddy.
Yeah.
The entire shoot when the camera wasn't rolling. He was Teddy Perkins. Would you like some tea? And like fucking with everybody. I don't know if that's the actual case, but that's the rumor on the interwebs. But yeah, that to me is definitely the episode that jumps out at me as like the standout tangent episode.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it really, the first one, I would say, where like they start, because like, all right, so for people who haven't watched it, the first 3 episodes are very, I don't want to call it sitcom-y, but just regular run-of-the-mill episodes about a rapper in Atlanta and his cousin, and then trying to make it as a rapper, and it's very, very grounded, right?
Yeah.
I would say that there's very little style being impressed upon the narrative going on. And then we get to an episode called Nobody Beats the Biebs. And that's the episode where Justin Bieber, so the main character, Paperboy, which is Donald Glover's character's cousin, is playing in like a charity basketball game. And Justin Bieber shows up, and he's this little asshole who does all this stuff and gets away with it, and nobody has a problem with it. The reason why this is stylistically is because they casted a black guy as Justin Bieber.
Right.
It wasn't Justin Bieber doing a cameo. They literally call him Justin Bieber. But it's a young man, black actor, playing Justin Bieber, just being obnoxious and, you know, unruly.
Yeah.
And from that point, that is when we kind of jump off. Because I know Teddy Perkins is definitely up there as well. But after Nobody Beats the Biebs, there's an episode called Value. Let me just double check what that episode was about. Because, that's a Van-centric episode. Van is his baby mama, girlfriend, fiance, wife. I'm not sure. I forget off the top of my head. But she has to deal. That kind of goes backwards towards the grounded reality narrative, because she has to like pass a piss test for smoking pot at school, and she has to figure out how to do it, and she's wringing piss out of her baby's diapers. It's clean and all this stuff. But then we go right back into absurdism with the episode BAN, Black America Network, which, by the way, if you're any kind of connected to hip-hop culture, BAN stands for something much different than Black America Network. But that is the episode where I fell in love with this show. And that's the episode where Paperboy goes on a television show, and the entire episode is framed like the television show that he's on,
with advertisements,
with
like
advertisements
in the middle,
right, bumping they bookend each advertising block. So every time the show is going to a commercial break, they start with a fake commercial, and then they go to real commercials. Then they come back with another fake commercial and go back into the episode. So so it really kind of blurs the line about, you know, what you're actually watching, which I thought was really creative.
And it starts off too, like the commercials at the beginning kind of feel like any old commercial. You don't really notice too much, but as it goes on,
they're so well done. They're so like aesthetically on point that you can't tell a difference. But then you start noticing that this is not like a normal commercial. Like, what the fuck is happening? I think one of my favorite commercials on that isn't the one with the wolf trying to eat the cereal and the black kids, and the cop beats the shit out of the wolf, and he's like, I'm just trying to eat cereal. You're lucky I'm not eating these goddamn kids. But, you know, they use that opportunity to comment on like police brutality and things like that, and like, why would you do that? But then also in that episode, that's the first episode before they do Teddy Perkins, because Teddy Perkins is season 2. But that's the first episode where they do... oh, no, that's not the first episode where they do Whiteface. Whiteface is in the episode with Van in the episode before, where she goes back to her class, and there's that one student.
They talk about the student,
Yeah, and he's in Whiteface. But then the next episode, the BAN episode, is one of the segments that takes place. So the whole episode, I think Paperboy comments on transgenderism and says that it's weird. He doesn't necessarily have a problem with it, but he's just uncomfortable with it. It's new to him. He's not familiar with the aspects of it. And he gets attacked by like a mob of like LGBTQ people or whatever. And he's on like this black entertainment talk show with like, I think it's called Montague, but it's kind of like a Pierce Morgan meets Arsenio Hall kind of thing.
It's directly taken off a show by this host by the name of Tavis Smiley, who appears on PBS. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All
it's a
right.
very direct reference to Tavis Smiley.
Got it. I'm not familiar with that. So, but anyway, so Paperboy is kind of defending himself against these accusations that are going on that he's homophobic and transphobic, and then, then they go into this field piece about a young black guy who's got to be somewhere between 18 and 23, and he claims that he's like a middle-aged white man named Howard. And that's when that's when the show really starts getting like crazy, because here's my thing about that episode. I don't know how to interpret that, because when this show was originally launched, this was 2016, October 11th of 2016, the BAN episode first aired. The cultural standpoint on transgenderism was not what it is today in 2022. In 2016, like it was still like on the, I don't want to call it cutting edge, but like it was like something new to everyone.
Right.
I feel like if they presented the ideas that they did in this episode today, the show would get like canceled within 10 minutes. But I don't know if Donald Glover was highlighting like not a hypocrisy, but a ridiculous level of things about this particular movement, or if he was, like I'm lost as to whether or not he was highlighted, if he was like defending them or if he was attacking the idea. I honest to God, I cannot wring out where he was going with this episode.
I think ultimately the joke really in this episode is, the joke ends up becoming about the idea that like just because you share identities with some other group that you're going to be in agreement about all the things, because the ultimate irony is that later on, like Howard, when asked about like gay rights, like starts saying like, oh, that's disgusting, and it's like the woman who's like defending transgender people is suddenly shocked because she's like, well, I thought we were on the same team. Right.
Right. Yeah.
The boy's just like laughing his ass off about it, because, and I think that's one of the big ideas that is a big theme throughout the show, is the idea that there really isn't a common community between all these segmented groups. It's everybody's sort of out for their own needs and their own what they need to get done for themselves. And I think it plays into a much bigger theme that is not, I don't think it's articulated in any sort of like direct way, but I think there is a certain theme about like, well, all this idea of like difference and whatever is kind of bullshit at the end. Like a great example is the FUBU episode. So like the FUBU episode is another anthology episode, and I'm jumping way ahead, but like it's an episode that kind of deals with kids in school trying to basically like one up each other.
Yeah.
Because like, oh, I got this FUBU shirt. It's like the new trendy thing. And then some kids at school, like sort of kind of bullying types find out like, oh, they're fake FUBU shirts. So like, who's the fake? Right.
Right.
And the idea of like, ultimately, what I get out of that episode is the idea of like, what really makes it fake, other than just like an idea in your head that like, this is the real one, this is the fake one.
Yeah.
And I think that becomes that is sort of an overarching theme in regards to sort of dealing with race, because like the idea of racism has been this idea that there's humans, and then there are people below humans, right, or different than humans.
Well, I don't know if I would call that necessarily racism for this episode. Wouldn't you say it's more like classism? Because the other kid,
the FUBU episode,
because the FUBU episode is two black kids and the same shirt, and one of them has a quote unquote authentic one, and the other one has a knockoff.
It is, and I think that they all kind of intermingle, like all these ideas kind of interconnect and intermingle within the overall series, because I think there is a broad statement trying to be made in regards to, because duality is a huge part of the overall story. It's a huge part of it because it deals with sort of the idea of like black and white communities. It deals with fake and real,
Mm.
and I think that it isn't always like obvious and upfront all the time, which I really enjoy because it kind of gives me room to think about, what do I think about that?
Absolutely, yeah, and that's one of my favorite things about the series in general.
And I think that that's kind of I do think that is in a large part sort of the point, is like that team that's making the show wants you to think about those things rather than just like hit you over the head with them. Because even an episode like, and I've been thinking about this is another episode I've been thinking a lot about, is the reparations episode. The way that it's done.
Season 3 episode, right?
Yeah, it's season 3 episode. Like all the anthology episodes I find to be heavy, contemplative. I always come away from them like, what the fuck?
They're my favorite episodes, without a doubt. Anytime they break from and don't get me wrong, the normal through lines, the storyline or whatever, is very interesting. Like, because it's well done, well acted, well directed, well shot, well written, the whole 9 yards.
But in an odd way, the meat of the story comes out in the anthology episodes.
Agreed.
The anthology episodes really do try and deep dive into what has been talked about within the series. And so like even the reparations episode, which is about like the idea of like, okay, there's like this string of civil lawsuits that go out where like black people are finding, your ancestor was owned like
my ancestor.
Yeah, my ancestor. Right. And like I'm coming to like get reparations from you because you owe me money big time. And like even that episode doesn't pick at all like a side. It just shows you events. It makes you kind of come to a conclusion about what you think about all those events.
Yeah.
And like it's a deeply I actually ended up going on YouTube and like looking for reactions on that episode because I was really curious what people thought about it. And like most of the reactions were from the black community, and it was like across the board.
I apologize. I'm telling you this right now that chances are me and you are the only 2 white people that have watched this show. Because I am frequently on Twitter going, why is no one else talking about this? And I have to look up the hashtag for Atlanta, whatever, and it's all black people talking about it. And I'm just like, why aren't more white people watching this amazing show?
You know what's really disappointing too is I think a lot of white people probably look at the show and think like it's all just like
black stereotype jokes and
or even just like hate whitey stuff, and it's like it's really not that at all. It's like
no,
it's very
it's fair.
It tries to be as fair as it can, and then also just be really honest about the perspective it's coming from.
Yes.
Like it's clearly from a black perspective.
Absolutely.
It has no no regrets or anything about it, and then like tries to also be as omni-perspectival as it can. And I think that is something that I want to see. I want to see in all art, and I don't see it enough at all. Like so much stuff like right now is incredibly like has like a direct agenda kind of message that it wants to kind of force on you. And Atlanta's just like, look, here's what we think about this stuff, but also here's just like how we see reality. Here's how we view things, but you make your own mind.
It's interesting that you say that because I've been listening to a brand new podcast. I'm not sure it'll appeal to you, but it was definitely right up my alley. For the 3 of the actors from Boy Meets World have started a podcast called Pod Meets World, and it's a rewatch podcast where they go back and watch episodes. And one of them, Ryder Strong, who plays Sean on the series, they were talking with the guy who plays the father, William Russ, and I forget how they mentioned it, but they talked about, because they're watching some of the early episodes from the first season, and every TV show, doesn't matter what it is, needs a couple of episodes, if not a couple seasons, to kind of find their stride. Yeah. But in the case of Boy Meets World, there was a stride that they found in terms of the characters, where they were like, okay, this is the dad's perspective, and this is the teacher's perspective, and like they have the dad and Mr. Feeney go at it in one of these episodes about, what's more important, a young boy spending time with his father, staying up late watching a baseball game, or sleeping through the test the next day, why can't he take a makeup test? You know what I mean? Like, you could still test him on this thing. Well, why couldn't you put him to bed at the right time? And it's like these, like, battling of these great ideas that are both very, rational ideas, where it's like, oh, he has a test tomorrow. He needs to go to bed early and he needs to take it. Well, tests aren't everything in the world, and sometimes spending time with the people you love the most is more important. So it's like these conflicting ideas, and they're talking about it, and Ryder Strong points out, because he's a writer and very much into literary and all that kind of stuff. He goes, that's the difference between good writing and bad writing. Good writing observes different perspectives on the same thematic premise or topic or whatever it may be, the plot, whatever's happening. It doesn't just, broad stroke one point of view. It allows other perspectives to bounce off each other. And it's one of my favorite things. And I think that is something that I'm learning and now going to infuse in my writing, is making sure there are different perspectives, not necessarily a white perspective, a black perspective, a gay perspective, stuff like that, but just somebody coming from a different perspective on what just happened, why it happened, why choices were made, etc. like that. Like, that really makes the difference. And I think that is now how I am going to define good writing from bad writing, because that's such an obscure or like a vague way. Like, anyone can make up a way, oh, that was good writing. Well, what do you mean by that? And most people can't really quantify it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I feel like that's how I'm going to quantify it, at least for the next while until I find a better idea. But to me, that really struck with me. And that's the thing about Atlanta. They are very clearly coming from a black perspective. But the other perspectives in the show aren't necessarily handled like mustache twirling villains and all of this kind of stuff. Like, even in there's an episode where Earn and Paperboy get locked up, and they're stuck in holding, and the guards are like beating the shit out of this guy, and he's like mentally ill. And it's like, well, yeah, the guards are fucked up for doing that. Why are they fucking doing that? Why aren't they helping this guy? And at the same time, they're dealing with like all these other crazy characters in holding that are like dialed to 11. You know what I mean? I'm not sure. I've been in the South, me and you both. I mean, you're still in the South, but we've dealt with South. There are some crazy characters that run amok in the South. So I don't know if he's necessarily dialing things up to 11 for the sake of entertainment and television and writing, but they're dealing with all these crazy characters, and they really don't have the time, and they're human beings. Let's put it like this. They're lazy. Everybody's lazy when it comes to a day job that they don't really want to do. So, like, it's not put in a perspective where they're just like hunting to beat the shit out of a black guy, but the black guy is crazy and he goes and drinks toilet water and then spits it on a guard. And the guard gets pissed up, and they all start like throwing a beat down on him, and it's like, well, that's fucked up. I understand why they're doing it. I don't think it's right why they're doing it, but they don't make it like they're hunting black people or out to get the guy at any point. It happens.
It's interesting that you say that too, because that kind of plays into a lot of the class stuff too. Because it's like it makes a point of portraying something that you notice a lot in the South, which is that like a lot of the cops are black cops, and a lot of the like they do just the same kind of things that white cops do. It's not just specifically white cop issue, the cop issue.
Right.
And it's something that, plays out across class lines too, because you have like an excellent example of that is the Juneteenth episode where they go to visit, I think it's Van's mom, right?
No, I don't think it's her mom, but I think it's like a friend of hers or something like that.
For some reason I thought that was her mom, but like,
she speaks, the woman speaks to her like a mother would to a daughter, or an older sister to a daughter, a younger sister. So I guess I could infer that as well, but I think it was just a friend, and that was the kind of the part of the episode, not to cut you off, was that
go
that character and her husband were both kind of speaking down to Earn and Van about their own history. You know what I mean? Like. And how they should handle it, because the husband is a white man and he's trying to educate Earn about, slavery and Juneteenth and Africa
and he's
and all this
literally
stuff.
the only white guy in the entire household, right?
Yes.
There's like tons of people there. Like, you know, it's predominantly a black crowd, and there's this guy, right? This white guy who's just like, he, you know, in a way, like when you look at the party, it almost is a parody of the idea of Juneteenth rather than actually a celebration of what it's supposed to be, because it's like everything's sort of themed off of like slavery, like slave shit.
It's how white people would celebrate Juneteenth.
Yeah, right.
That's the only way to describe it. How white people would celebrate Juneteenth. Like they have and not just white people, like rich white people.
Yeah.
Like that's the big thing. Like when Ern goes to the bar and he's I think he tries to order like a 7 and 7 or something, you know, something just like a very, not low class, but a very affordable drink that you can get at any bar that, you know, is probably popular amongst the African American community. I don't know. But they're like, excuse me, sir, we have a predefined drink list. Like, black people wouldn't do that. Like, it'd just be like, hey, man, we got some gin and juice. Let's mix it together. Let's see what we can get out of it. Like, that's just the culture. And so watching the white people, or it being done in a very white way with a ton of black people kind of kowtowing to it. You know what I mean? And that's the other thing with the wife and how she speaks to Van, which is like, I don't like this, da 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 da. But my man's got money, and like she's just like servicing this I guess you could call it like a guilt trip. I don't know if I would call it a guilt trip, because the white guy doesn't necessarily feel guilty. He's oddly enthusiastic about black culture in a way that
a fetish. It
doesn't seem fake to me when I watch it, that he's like putting it on, that he's afraid of being a racist, but it's more like he is very interested. He's over interested in the culture. And
a great example of that is the painting that like Ern's looking at. It's just like some Hawkman or something with a sword. It's like something you would see on the side of a van, you know, like some kind of fantasy spray art. And the white guy's like, oh yeah, that's based off of a Malcolm X quote. The whole time Ern's just like, he can't quite put two and two together. Like, what the fuck is wrong with this dude? You know?
Yeah, right.
And that's kind of what you get out of it, is just like, I think, you know, this sort of ties into stuff we talked about in a previous episode in regards to when corporate-minded people get attached to like liberatory
social movements,
right? It totally takes all the energy and all the authenticity out of like what was there originally,
because it's a marketing point now. It's not a movement.
Exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, that's another, like, that once again sort of plays into what I think is like an overarching theme throughout the series, is this idea of like, you know, how do you be authentic in a world in the world that we live in, when so much is like insincere, fake, like just people trying to posture on each other to influence each other, right? Like I think another episode that plays into that is I don't know what else to call it other than the money episode. It's like the episode after Ern gets like a big paycheck, and they all go out and like they go to a strip bar, and like he's just like flushing money for like all this bullshit that like ultimately never is really fulfilling, you know? Like it's one of those things where and that comes up pretty frequently in the show, where it's just like money is this thing we all need, but it's always unfulfilling. It's always this sort of empty hole that we're constantly trying to we're trying to fill, basically.
Not to get off the topic of Atlanta, but we were talking about the co-opting of movements and things as a marketing point. Have you by any chance started watching The Boys on Netflix?
I haven't. No,
that's going to be my next.
People are talking about a lot.
That's going to be my next recommendation to you, because I'm currently watching it myself. For the first time. I'm about just starting. I'm a few episodes. No, I'm halfway through the third season, which is the most recent season. But there's a character on it, and like the superheroes work for a corporation. It's very weird. But one of the characters on it is outed as being gay. Mm-hmm. And several episodes later, it might even be a season or two later, they go to there's a couple scenes that take place in a Disney World type amusement park that's run by the same corporation, and it's literally they have gay themed everything with rainbows, and I'll just tell you this right now, the character that gets outed is a lesbian. So they they market her, like a taco shop after her lesbianness. Like it really turns it to 11, but it really is. It's so nice and refreshing to see stuff like that, because it's like, I think you and I and a lot of people see that, and like we're constantly watching things going. Like it's July now. We just got past June, which is Pride Month, and how many fucking companies have turned their logo into rainbow? Right? They've plastered the rainbow. They've just overlaid it onto their normal logo. And that's exactly what these kinds of shows are commenting on. The Boys, Atlanta, etc., which is just the co-opting of actual movements, turning them into selling points. And then I think that's where a lot of divisiveness happens, because a lot of people do see the inauthenticity that's going on from the corporations, but then associate that with the actual movement. Do you know what I mean? And that's when they get uptight about it. And then the people that were a part of the movement originally are like, no, this is not where we're not selling you shit. We're trying to change things. And that's when heads start bumping and things start getting devolved into just stupid Twitter arguments. You know what I mean? And I think it's very responsible that shows like Atlanta, The Boys, I'm sure there are other shows, are commenting on this, because I feel like and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about Atlanta on this show, is because to me, that is art. They are not, and as you pointed out before, they are coming from a black perspective, but they're acknowledging other points of view, not necessarily perspectives, but points of view, reasonings, motivations, etc. It's not a broad stroke. And that to me is good art, because like you said, you come away from episodes and I'm just the same. I'm confused in a way where I'm not frustrated. There's a difference between confused and frustrated. Like, I could watch Tree of Life and be like, what the fuck is this? I don't understand. I don't have any point of jumping off where I can start putting pieces together and have thoughts in my mind. It's just abstract. Whereas this is absurdism, right? Parody almost to a point. Dark comedy, whatever you want to call it. But it is honest in stirring up thoughts where you could go in different directions. And that's one of the beauties of it, is that you and I could watch the same episode on this. And if you had a different perspective on what it meant, I would not be upset at all. I would be like, that's really interesting. And no matter what you said, I would be very interested to hear what you would say. And I would hope that you would feel the same way about me. And I would just be that way about it. And it wouldn't be the Star Wars thing where people are trying to rip each other's head off as to whether or not it's good. It's really about deciphering the code. What were they trying to say? Do you think they said this? Well, what about that? Like, that really lends itself to discussion. And that to me is what good art is about discussion, not argument, not about winning, not about my point of view was right. It was more about, well, what do you think they were trying to say? What do you think that meant? How do you think we can apply this to how we go forward in our lives? And you know, and that's one of the beauties, I think, of Atlanta, is when they deviate from that normal episode structure. You know, rapper trying to make it out of Atlanta. He's got to make a concert. He's got to sell albums. Does he have the rights to his music? Yada, yada, yada. That stuff is interesting. Don't get me wrong. I do enjoy those episodes. But then there's other episodes, and they stir up discussion like how we're having now. The absurdism, I think, is one of the things that they play well in this. And I've talked to you about this before. Brilliant. My favorite moment, hands down, without a doubt, was the setup and payoff, which we all know from past episodes that I love, of the invisible car. Did I spoil that for you? I can't remember. No. I did not spoil that for you. What was your reaction to the invisible car?
It was hilarious. Like, it was one of the... It's one of the funniest scenes in the show, and it's also something that's so... Because they set it up, and I'm like, okay, this is going to come back at some point in the show.
I didn't see that coming, but...
You have no expectation of when that's going to happen, and it happens in, like, the most And that's what makes it so funny, is it happens in like the most unexpected moment, because it's actually kind of a serious moment.
Yes.
And I think that's how a lot of the humor in that show works, is like they will pick these max tension moments where you are not expecting this to be funny, and then something incredibly funny happens, and it's sort of a dark humor sort of mechanism, I guess, and it's definitely what lends a lot of the impact to that show, for sure.
The beauty, I think, of that particular setup and payoff was that the setup and payoff was set up earlier by the escalation of absurdism as it was going. So
yeah,
the like we talked before about the episode where they're in holding for jail after there's been a incident with a handgun. They play up the idea that Atlanta is filled with all these colorful characters that are just crazy, just completely out there, and you don't know what's happening. You don't know if it's a serious crazy or just like a played for laughs crazy. And in the earlier part of this episode, and I'm sorry I'm spoiling this for people, but in the earlier part of this episode, they're talking about this guy who supposedly is so rich that he bought himself an invisible car, and he hands himself the guy's phone, and he looks on his Instagram, and this guy leaning on nothing. Like you would pose like you're leaning on a car, but he's leaning on nothing. So you ask yourself, based on prior episodes, is this just another one of these kooky characters that we're going to have to deal with?
Yeah.
And then at the very end of the episode, literally as the episode cuts to credits, out of focus in the background, the invisible car takes off. And it's so unexpected, A, because of what's currently happening in that moment, but also because it escalates the absurdism as it goes on. And I love that they do that. They build on a setup and payoff by creating another setup and a payoff. And it's an escalating factor where they've taken themselves from a really grounded show into a show that can be grounded, but can also be absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it never feels out of place, ever. It could be a straight episode about, this is a very serious topic we're talking about, reparations and what happens if it ever happens. And here's another episode about two white, woke, liberal lesbians adopting black kids because they can use it as a scam to sink Social Security money and all this kind of stuff. Like, this is very serious things. And then in this other episode, we have a guy driving around in an invisible car. We've got Donald Glover dressed up like Michael Jackson, who might be a serial killer in that episode. But then even on times like, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the characters. The most, and he's not boring, but the most boring character, in my opinion, is Paperboy, because he's pretty much just a generic black rapper, right? Like he's got a struggle that he's dealing with, trying to overcome his circumstances, and he's very real and polite. But the things that happen with him are the grounded ridiculous. Like when he's trying to get the haircut from the barber, and the barber's driving him all around town, trying to run his errands and avoid things and, get into this. And like that stuff is grounded ridiculously. And then you have characters like Darius, who are just space case. but he makes like, he'll say something completely out there and you're like, I don't know what the fuck that means. And by the end of the episode, you're like, I want to know what that means, or I do know what that means now. And you know what I mean? And then like you got Ern, who kind of straddles the line a little bit both ways. Oh, okay, I take that back. I think the most boring character is actually Vanessa. Until the very... Did you finish, by the way, season 3?
I haven't finished the series yet.
All right. I realized I was doing a little research for this episode that I did finish season 3. I had watched the last episode, and I didn't realize it was the last episode, which is kind of bad because it wasn't that great of an episode. But mostly, I would say Van, his Zazie Beetz, not exactly the most entertaining of characters, but again, very grounded, dealing with very real issues and things like that, but not anywhere near what some of the other things happen. But Darius is definitely the top of the ridiculous spectrum, right?
No, he's definitely he's my favorite character because he's kind of the stoner philosophical dude who has a very zen mindset about things and just kind of accepts things as they happen. And I mean, really, honestly, the difference between him and Paperboy really is just their reaction to events. Because Paperboy is also similarly kind of like just takes it in, but he also reacts
reserved. Yeah.
He also is more prone to react and to do something about the situation, where Darius is just like, you know,
let me get out of this.
I'm gonna die, you know.
Right. And to be fair, the Teddy Perkins episode is definitely a highlight for Darius because he's the only one in peril in that episode.
Yeah.
And he does try to get out of it, but he also is there. He's also like, I want the piano. He won't leave because he wants the piano. But at the same point, like there's also, I forget what episode it is. There's the episode where and I feel like as a Zen person, it might have been out of character for him to do this, but it was kind of early on. I don't remember if it was first or second season. Do you remember the season the episode when Darius goes to the shooting range and he puts up the thing of the dog?
Yeah.
And then all of the people start getting pissed off. The white guys get pissed off at him for shooting a dog. He's like, well, you're shooting a human. And then it's like they start getting pissed off. But then the Muslim people come over and they start siding with...
that's right.
With I forget who they side with, but it makes Darius uncomfortable, and Darius tries to leave, and then the gun shop owner pulls a gun on him, and all this. But that felt like weirdly antagonistic for Darius to do, because it's almost like he knew that they were going to get upset that he was shooting at a dog.
I was trying to, because I mean that doesn't ever connect with anything in the rest of season 3, does it?
I don't think so.
Because I've seen. When I was watching it, I felt like, is this going to connect with the whole plot line where, Ern gives Darius money to like get this dog,
the dogs.
Fees. I was like, how is this going to connect? We never see it connect, so I don't know if it was just like, that is a weird scene because I don't know if it really has anything to do with anything else in the series. Like, I kind of just assumed maybe it would connect somehow with the whole thing that Darius was doing with Ern, but like we never see the connection made if there is.
Right, because I mean that episode resolves with because the synopsis for anybody who hasn't seen it was Ern needs money. I mean that's the floor of the show is where every story starts from, is that they need money for something, and they're in a poverty situation. That's obviously going to be a big factor. Ern needs like $2,000 or something right away, and Darius is like, "Oh, I can help you get that." And he's like, "Really? You can help me get $2,000?" "Yeah, absolutely." And they go to a pawn shop and they trade a thing for a thing, and then he takes it to another guy, and it's like he's got a sword, and he trades the sword for this and for a dog, and then he trades the dog to a guy, and the dog is a breeder. And he's like, "Oh, we'll get $2,000 per puppy," or something like that. Yeah. And he's like, "Well, when do I get the money?" He's like, "Well, like 6 months. They got to, mate the dogs and have the puppies and then sell the puppies." And he's like, "I needed money right now." And Darius is like, "Oh, here, take my phone, trade that in." And, now we're friends. Like that's I think that was really what that ended up being, was about just, establishing a base relationship between Ern and Darius.
Sure.
But still, the gun episode to me is a standout because it feels like it's not so much that, well, Darius is a very Zen character, but at the same time, he challenges thought. That's where his strength or character lies, is that depending on how he reacts to a situation, he's challenging the thought process behind it, the motivation, the rationale, the thematic, whatever you want to look at it. But that to me was always the only episode that he stuck out as antagonistic. Like he was there to start problems. But otherwise, he's constantly the wise man.
No, he does have an antagonistic streak, and in, like, another example is when he buys the hat that's like Southern made and has like a Confederate flag on it, and then he like wipes out all the letters and is just "you mad." And like, there's this white lady staring at him, like really like upset, and he's just like, whatever, you know?
Yeah, I mean, but I think one of my favorite quotes of his is when it's during Robin's season. It's like the first episode, I think, of season 2. When he's talking about how everybody robs each other starting around like September, October, because they're starting to save up for Christmas. I don't remember what the exact quote is, but that was one of the real things that was illuminating to me, where it's like, oh wow, there's like a season for when robberies go up, and it's only because people want to give gifts to their families for Christmas. Right. That's literally the only motivation, is that they don't have enough money to get gifts, so they rob people and do things just to get a little bit of extra money for Christmas. And that was very illuminating to me, like, because I'd never thought about crime having a season. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just didn't, that never occurred to me, but that's obviously one of the things that's being presented in the show. And that's one of the things that I'm grateful that I've watched this show for, is like, there's so many great thematic premises that I've been able to draw out of it. And who knows, like we always talk about the intentional fallacy, where a creator's intention is completely irrelevant at the point of completion of a work, because it's about, you know, the viewer taking it in. But I have to guess that was some of their intention, and I correctly grabbed onto it. But who knows?
Well, that definitely plays into some of, like, I think a lot of the absurd humor plays into the themes of, like, okay, what are things in our lived lives that are absurd, right? Like the idea of, you know, stealing from somebody else to give to somebody else, because we always assume that, you know, theft happens for a strictly egotistical individual's selfish need. And ultimately it kind of plays in this idea that, like, there's a disconnect for a lot of people on a personal level of how they see self-worth, right? Because, like, part of self-worth comes from the idea of, like, what do I give to my community? And then what do you do? Because people will go to all kinds of ends to make themselves feel that self-worth of, like, oh, I've given to my community. But a lot of times it requires taking from somebody else. So I think it's a show that's also just definitely worth rewatching in that regard too, because there's repeat viewings give new sort of ideas and insight too. So yeah, I definitely love the way that it approaches art in that way.
And there's a lot of attention to detail that you can miss easily. On a first watch, and it's easily rewatchable. I mean, I wouldn't say it's rewatchable in a slightly heavy way. It's not like a lighthearted Arrested Development Community type. Put it on for lunchtime and hang out. But when you're in that kind of mood where you're very, like, introspective and thoughtful and trying to, like, you want to be challenged, like in terms of your thought process and, like, perspective, like, it's really easy to put on an episode of Atlanta and be like, there's never an episode where I'm like, oh, that's a weak episode. That doesn't belong in this season or in this show at all. Every episode is powerful in one way or another. It doesn't matter what you take away. Some of them, you know, and I'm realizing this now as I'm saying it. I talked about Van being the least interesting character, but you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm betting that those episodes are probably a little bit more meaningful to women.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Because those aren't situations that, when Van's in a situation, I'm normally not, I can't identify with that. So I can see where women or black women or, you know, whatever, a different piece of our society might see that differently than I do. And maybe that, you know, a black man who is, you know, relied on hip hop as a way of generating income for himself would see Paperboy as the most interesting thing, and maybe thinks that the artsy things that me and you are gushing over in this episode right now are the worst parts of the series. You know what I mean? Like, maybe he just watches it for the regular storyline and goes, I feel seen. Someone sees the struggles that I'm going through Paperboy and is, you know, acknowledging them. So that's the beauty of this show, is that we're two white guys. We're two nerdy, artistic white guys talking about this show. And I'm telling you this right now, if you listen to this show of our podcast and you have not seen Atlanta, you should absolutely check out Atlanta, because it's got so many artistic executions done well. And one of the things that I wanted to discuss really quick before we wrap up.
Sure.
A lot of times, the episodes are written by Donald Glover, and I'm going to be, I guess you could call me racist for this, but I'm not, I'll take it. A lot of the names that show up as the writers seem to be African Americans, seem to be black people that are writing the episodes. Now, I don't know if there's a writer's room per se, or if it's just one person actually writing the episode. However, because, I mean, I'm looking at the names right now. Jamal Alori, Stefani Robinson, Donald Glover, Teofik Colade, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Stephen Glover, who I'm assuming is related to Donald Glover in some way. Right, so it's definitely written from a lot of black perspective, if not all. The one thing that did surprise me a lot, did you notice that directed by? There's frequently Hiro Murai, who that's an Asian name, so I'm assuming he's Asian. And it's very interesting to me to see that ethnic culture being able to execute an African American ethnic culture so well. You know what I mean? Like it really, it was almost like Donald Glover didn't do a FUBU situation for us, by us. He literally had someone from a different culture directing a lot of the episodes. I would say at least 50%.
I imagine that is probably, I think that that's part of what lends that ability to be kind of multi-perspective in a lot of ways, is like put somebody, I mean, I don't know anything about Mariah's history, if he's, first generation American or if he's immigrated or whatever, but like there's definitely like the way that the show is shot and the way that the show is done definitely has like a very objective sort of lens. Like it's very like, just take it in, and so I'm sure that was part of the intentional like aspect of it, right? Like have all of the perspective of like what you want written into the story, but then kind of take a step back so that you can have, and maybe they've been longtime creative friends and they've just known each other too. Yeah. Like there's all kinds of, I don't know. I could go into a whole deep dive of assumptions on this, but I just don't know enough about, the history of the creative team on the show.
I'm looking at Hero's IMDb. Not that that's a fair snapshot of someone's abilities or relationships or whatever. I mean, he's directed a couple of Childish Gambino music videos, which I mean, not surprising.
I mean, that goes far enough back to probably say like they probably had a creative repertoire.
It looks like he did a lot of music videos. He did Enrique Iglesias, Usher, B.O.B.
Huh.
So it's a kind of hip hop mentality. So it might be just on a Tribe Called Quest. That's kind of stuff. Television direction. He did a couple of episodes of Funny or Die, Drunk History, Legion, Snowfall, Sea Oak. None of these things I've heard of. Station 11. He directed a couple episodes of Barry. I don't know if you've seen that episode or that show. That's a great show too. And then Atlanta. And something called The Bear, which I have not heard of or seen. But to be honest with you, I mean, the writing is definitely a big part of this show about what makes it great. But I would definitely check out Hero's other directing work just based off the fact that I've seen his name come up on so many episodes of this show. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like he's definitely been a voice that's influenced this show heavily. And I'm very interested to watch his other work to see, because I feel like if I watch his other work, I'd be like, oh, that's a Hero thing. When I watch Atlanta again for a rewatch, I could be like, oh, that's what Hero, you know what I mean? Like that's the touch he added. And that's kind of the way that I like to do things sometimes. I like to be able to look at something great and be like, I like this. I'm going to check out what this person did otherwise without these people, this other crew or writers or whatever. And it helps me kind of break down what I can expect in the future when I see something. So if I see Hero's name, I'll be like, oh, Hero's directing that and so-and-so's writing that. Oh, that's going to be good. You know what I mean? It's like when you know that apple or like oranges and bananas are going to taste good together. You tasted an orange, you tasted a banana. together. Oh, that's a good, interesting flavor. I'll definitely check that out. But yeah, so I don't know what the situation is with season 3 of Atlanta because it ends on a weird note. It ends on a van episode. Which, to be honest, I said that I had watched it all, but I had watched about half that episode, and then I had to stop because I was taking care of my son, and I have not finished the actual episode yet. So I don't know if it completes on something, but good Lord, I'm looking at the ratings right now. 61% decrease from season 2. So I do not think they're going to have...
What was I mean, what was the time period between season 2 and season 3?
A big jump.
So that was probably, I mean, if it was a COVID related sort of situation.
I don't know if it was a COVID thing. I think Donald Glover got tied up with a lot of projects because he was working on the Star Wars thing, and
guy who plays Paperboy is also in movies. Like, he's in Bullet Train, so like he's been busy doing other stuff.
He was in a Marvel. He was in that Marvel movie Eternals. He was in the Child's Play reboot. He's in a lot of things right now. So, he is pretty busy. Same thing with Lakeith Stanfield, who plays Darius. He's in a lot of things. Sorry to Bother You. Like, you know, there's a whole bunch of things that he's. I think he's collaborated with Jordan Peele several times.
Okay.
So like he's pretty big too. Donald Glover is like a workaholic. He's kind of like you. He's constantly got something cooking.
Yeah.
But it looks like season 3 was ordered by FX in June of 2018, and it's now 2022. So it couldn't have just been COVID that was hanging this up.
Sure.
But apparently, I'm looking at this right now. In August of 2019, 2.5 years before the season started airing, this season, season 3, FX renewed the series for a 4th and final season. So I'm guessing there's another season coming. Okay. I don't know when, but apparently
this has been a pretty frequent thing that has happened with a lot of shows, especially longer running shows. I would say, I'm not super experienced with like FX shows, but they either run for forever or they don't make it past 3 seasons a lot of the time. And that's speaking from personal experience, there is a lot of resistance generally for getting qualified for seasons after like the first 2, because by that time, like, you know, a company will figure out, okay, this IP has like you know, the ability to run for a while, or it doesn't. And I guess with Atlanta, I guess they must have negotiated something that worked out for everybody as best as it could.
Well, because I was looking at the ratings too. The first season, the premiere episode of season 1 of Atlanta came in with like 1 million viewers.
Yeah,
which isn't bad. And then this season had an average of 0.25 million viewers, which is that's literally 75% drop.
Yeah, it's a huge drop off.
And you know what I mean? Like, and as each of these amazing, talented people that are involved on this show grow and do other projects, and they grow their value in terms of what they can contribute to a business sense in the industry. Their cost is going to go up, but the return on the particular series for the studio is going to go way down. You know what I mean? So like, that's how that's because this is like a multiple Emmy award winning show. Me and you have gushed about it for an hour now, and we could probably go for longer. But the fact of the matter is, it comes down to the money, and if people aren't tuning in and they're not making enough money to support the show, they have to pull the plug. And that's so devastating to me as someone who loves this. I genuinely love this show because it's the kind of show that I wish was, or the kind of approach that I wish so many other projects, whether it be a television, movie, book, comic, you name it, I wish took the kind of approach and execution and style that this did.
I mean, I will say too, though, like, I think the last couple of years, I've been starting to see sort of a revitalization, I guess, of like really interesting movie making and filmmaking sort of techniques and stuff. Like, I guess I say that after having watched Atlanta, but Atlanta's been out for a while, so maybe it was the tip of the spear of like what's kind of happening, because I know I've talked about Everything Everywhere All at Once as being another show that or movie that I really enjoyed, and like I actually saw a trailer for a movie I'm excited to see because
Hocus Pocus 2?
No, not that one. I know that you're excited about it.
Absolutely.
No, it's a new George Miller film, and I'm kind of a big fan of George Miller films. It's called 3,000 Years of Longing.
I haven't even heard of this.
It stars Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba, and yeah, I think from the trailer what I've gathered is that Idris Elba is like a genie, and like Tilda Swinton has somehow found him, and accidentally released him into the world. And
what is this called again?
3,000 Years of Longing.
Okay.
So it's George Miller, who's made Mad Max, Babe. Like Babe's like one of my favorite movies ever. It's like,
I don't think I've watched Babe since I was a kid.
It's a really fucking good movie, and it holds up too. Like,
interesting.
Because George Miller's just like an interesting director. Like, he deals with
same director as Mad Max, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like he did Fury Road. Like he did I'm trying to remember what else he's done. He's done a couple other movies, but like
it's an eclectic list, right?
He's an eclectic kind of guy. So like that's what I like about him, because he'll go into areas you would not expect. And so anyway, I'm all this to say, like, there's just like kind of newer looking or fresh stories coming out again, and I'm happy to see that.
We're getting there. We're definitely getting there. I'm looking at his credits right now. He's doing Furiosa, and I think they recast and they're not using Charlize Theron. I think they're using a younger actress.
Huh.
So it's like a prequel, I guess. I don't know. An untitled Mad Max project that he's doing, so he's going back to the well there. 3,000 Years of Longing. He got a special thanks in Last Night in Soho. I did not see that movie, but that's Edgar Wright, and I really should. Say Goodbye to Love. He made a short film, which is very interesting for big-time directors to be doing after they've made, you know what I mean? Same thing, he got a special thanks in Baby Driver. Mad Max was his big, most recent film. Happy Feet 2? He was the director, producer. He wrote the lyrics for several songs. He was the writer.
Yeah, you see what I mean? Like, this guy's kind of
He also did the original Happy Feet. Babe, Pig in the City. Babe. Oh, he did both Babe movies. There's 2 Babe movies. I didn't realize there was 2.
I never saw Pig in the City. I didn't. I had too much respect for the first film.
He wrote and directed the second one, so I don't know. Maybe it's worth checking
good.
out.
Yeah.
Twilight Zone the movie. He was a director in one of the segments. Road Warrior, which is a Mad Max film. Wow, he's kind of all out there. I have a personal grudge against George Miller because he not personally, but he was intricate in tanking my Justice League project.
Really?
Oh, yeah, because remember, you would know this, the listeners might not. When I was in college, I wrote a spec script, which is industry terms for writing without anyone asking you to, for Justice League. I was doing it for a class, and my teacher was a well-known, I don't know if he actually won an Oscar. I know the film won an Oscar, Oscar-winning producer, and he was reading it, and he had his, thumb on the pulse that superheroes were on the cusp of being hot. This was 2008. So there was before Marvel Cinematic Universe took off. It was before Avengers. It was before anything. It was really right around, it was before even Dark Knight came out. I think it was 2007. I take that back. 2007. And I wrote a Justice League spec script, and my entire class was fired up about it, and he could see that it was a big deal. And he was like, you know what? I can set up a meeting at Warner Brothers and we can go in and pitch this to them. And this fucking Connecticut boy who'd never done anything, wrote this because I love superheroes and I just wanted to do something. And I was admittedly fresh out of ideas for the class. And I was just like, fuck it. I'll just write this for fun. we were literally having meetings. I was having meetings with this producer in his school office. He was giving me notes on the script, things I had to change, punch up, fix, all the usual jazz. He literally was going to call the next day. He was like, finish these tweaks, send it to me, I'll read it, and then I'll call up the studio, I'll set the meeting, and we'll work on plane tickets and arrangements and all that kind of shit. And then George Miller's Justice League was announced. Do you remember he was going to direct the Justice League, which with Armie Hammer as Batman and like all these other people? They had costumes, they had a whole 9 yards. They were like, they not at that point, but down the line they got to it. And then, as everybody may or may not know, that movie was canceled. It was the weirdest thing. I've never seen a movie like get that far into pre-production and get the plug pulled out of it. And I think there might have been a documentary in the works that came out that explained what happened. I've never watched it, but
it's really weird because at that time, like, people were on the fence about comic book movies, and like, because like I think Dark Knight was still kind of a fluke. Like they were like, oh, it's Christopher Nolan, then maybe that's why that movie's doing so well. And then, Iron Man
and Dark Knight came out in the same year, 2008. Which is when we graduated. So this was 2007. So this was before Dark Knight or Iron Man. So pay fucking attention, people. I'm ahead of the curve right here. I know what the fuck's up. You wanted a fucking team-up movie? I wrote a team-up movie before that even happened. You liked Shazam? Shazam was a big hit for Warner Brothers. Guess what? It was fucking Shazam fighting Superman a la Kingdom Come in my goddamn script.
You should write the spec script for the Marvel DC crossover.
It's coming. You know that's gonna fucking happen because we've all thought about, wouldn't it be great if Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield came back? That'll never happen. But blah blah blah. Everybody in their minds right now, the thing that's furthest out of reach is like the Justice League versus the Avengers, and we all think that can't ever happen. But if you went
There's no other reason you go into multiverse stories other than to like open up that rabbit hole.
That's true. That's a good point. I never thought about that being the conduit to getting that to happen, but you know what? It could fucking happen now.
That's where it goes.
It could very well happen. All right, we're off the topic of Atlanta now, but I guess the point of the matter is me and Rainwater both fully approve that you watch this show. If you have Hulu at the moment when this is being recorded and coming out in the recent times, you should be able to watch it on Hulu, no problem. Personally, I bought it on Vudu. I don't want to watch ads unless they are created and fake by Donald Glover. So I would recommend you buy it, but that's just personally on my part. If season 4 ever does happen, I don't know how long we're gonna have to wait for it to actually come out. I absolutely think you should tune in and watch it. I don't think it's gonna happen. I think something will fall through and it won't ever happen. But knock on wood, I hope it does, because I would really love to see these guys, knowingly take their curtain call and, leave it all out there, because I feel like even though they've been uncompromising for the first 3 seasons for the most part, because the things that they're saying don't really get acknowledged that much by either the corporate studio structure or just, artists in general. They don't take those risks. They have been taking those risks. I kind of want to see them with no fucks to give. Yeah. It's the last season. Yeah. We're not coming back. Here's no fucks to give. I kind of want to see that happen. That's kind of all we have for this episode. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm very happy to announce that this Tuesday, in case you haven't noticed, this is just a friendly reminder. This has nothing to do with anything, but one of my favorite shows on my birthday is coming back. And this is a show I think we're going to talk about like we talked about today. We're going to talk about this show in October during spooky season as part of our Halloween festivities. But What We Do in the Shadows returns for their next season on Tuesday night. And that's one of my favorite shows. It's so weird. I have a love-hate relationship with Taika Waititi because he's the creative mind behind What We Do in the Shadows, but he's also done the last 2 Thor movies, and I fucking hate him for those. But I love What We Do in the Shadows, and I love some of his other work, but that's a podcast for another day. Mr. Rainwater, if you have any last thoughts on Atlanta or any of that, please feel free to throw them out there.
That's all I got. Yep.
All right. We will see everybody next week. Good night.
Good night.